Hi CIS 4th graders, welcome to library. So this is how we're going to be doing library for a little while. I'm going to try to keep this as normal as possible, so when you come to the library we sit down and we talk about a book that I'm about to read. We talk a little bit about that book before I read it, and then when I read it I show you the pictures and ask you questions, and then afterwards we discuss it for a little bit. So I'm going to do that same exact thing. It's going to look a little different obviously because it is on here, but that's okay. So the book I'm going to read today is a Native American folk tale, and it is called The Rough-Faced Girl by Rafe Martin. And the illustrator is David Shannon, and the reason I'm bringing that up is because the illustrations in this book are absolutely beautiful. So I hope that you're able to see them good when I hold it up to you. Before we get started, Native American folktale, that's what this is. Under what genre would this Native American folktale fall under? I know that you know the answer to this. So if you know, answer, remember, either to yourself out loud or to someone who might be listening with you. So if you said traditional literature, you are correct. Anybody remember how traditional literature stories got started? Give you a second. And I know some people said the right answer. So if you said it was started by storytelling passed down from generations to generations, then you are absolutely correct. And I know that some of you said that. Also, before I forget, this is a reading level of a 4.0, and the quiz number is 6140, but if you can't remember that, that's okay. I'll put all of that information along with the AR link in the description below this video. So, all right, so yes, it is a Native American folktale, and this is traditional literature, and also this story might also remind you of a fairy tale, which fairy tales are also traditional literature. And a fairy tale that you might be familiar with, so you might think about that. And also traditional literature stories. Remember we talked about how they were told to family and friends in order to entertain, and they also taught life lessons that people could use in their lives. Sometimes they were lessons about how to be good, sometimes they were lessons about what happens when you're not good, all kinds of things. So try to think about what you could learn from this, what the life lesson might be while you're listening to this, and we'll bring that up afterwards. And then also try to think about what fairy tale this might remind you of. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Okay, remember this is the rough-faced girl. Once long ago, there was a village by the shores of Lake Ontario. Off from the other wigwams of this village stood one great huge wigwam. Painted on its sides were pictures of the sun, moon, stars, plants, trees, and animals. And inside this wigwam were said to live a very great, rich, powerful, and supposedly handsome, invisible being. However, no one could see him except his sister, who lived there too. Many women wanted to marry this invisible being, but his sister said, "Only the one who can see him can marry him." Now in this village there lived a poor man who had 3 daughters. The 2 older daughters were cruel and hard-hearted, and they made their younger sister sit by the fire and feed the flames. When the burning branches popped, the sparks fell on her, and in time her hands became burnt and scarred. Her arms, too, became rough and scarred. Even her face was marked by the fire, and her beautiful long black hair hung ragged and charred. And those 2 older sisters laughed at her, saying, "Ha! You're ugly, you rough-faced girl." And they made her life very lonely and miserable indeed. One day, these 2 older sisters went to their father and said, "Father, give us some necklaces. Give us some new buckskin dresses. Give us some pretty beaded moccasins. We're going to marry the invisible being." So their father gave them these things. Dressed in their finest, the 2 girls marched through the village. All the people pointed and stared, "Look at those beautiful girls," they said. "Surely they shall marry the invisible being." And if those two girls were proud and hard-hearted before, they were even prouder now, and they walked haughtily through the village. At last, they came to the wigwam of the invisible being, and there was his sister waiting. "Why have you come?" she asked. "We want to marry the invisible being," they answered. "That's why we're here." "If you want to marry my brother," she replied, "you have to have seen him. Tell me, have you seen the invisible being?" "Of course we've seen him," they insisted. "Can't you see how pretty we are? Can't you see the beautiful clothes we wear?" "Oh yes, anyone can tell that we've truly seen the invisible being." "All right," she said quietly. "If you think you've seen him, then tell me, what's his bow made of?" And suddenly her voice was swift as lightning and strong as thunder. Okay, now remember the sister said the only person that could marry the invisible being was the one that could actually see him. "His bow," they stammered in surprise. "His, bow? We know." But turning desperately to one another, they whispered, "What shall we say? Let's say it's the oak tree." So they said, "It's the great oak tree." "No," said the sister of the invisible being. "No." Oh, she saw at once how they lied. "Tell me," she continued, "if you think you've seen my brother, the invisible being, then what's the runner of his sled made of?" We know," cried the two sisters, but whispering feverishly again, they wondered, "What shall we say? What shall we say? Let's say it's the green willow branch." "No," said the sister when she heard. "No, you have not seen my brother. Now go home." "Just test us fairly," they exclaimed. "We've seen him. Just don't ask us all these silly questions." "All right," said the sister of the invisible being. "Come with me." And she took them back to the great wigwam and sat them in the seats furthest from the entrance and the guest seats. Soon they heard footsteps coming along the path. Then something stepped inside. Though they heard breathing, the two sisters still couldn't see a thing. Suddenly a great bow and a beaded quiver of arrows appeared in the air and were set down. But those two girls sat there, their eyes wide. All through that night, they never saw a thing more, and in the morning, they had to go home, ashamed. The next day, the rough-faced girl went to her father and said, "Father, may I please have some beads? May I have a new buckskin dress and some pretty moccasins? I am going to marry the invisible being, for wherever I look, I see his face." But her father sighed. "Daughter," he said, "I'm sorry. I have no beads left for you, only some little broken shells. I have no buckskin dress, and as for moccasins, all I have left are my old, worn, cracked, and stretched out pair from last year, and they're much too big." But she said, "Whatever you can spare, I can use." So he gave her these things. Then she found dried reeds, and taking the little broken shells, she strung a necklace. She stripped birch bark from the dead trees and made a cap, a dress, and leggings. Then with a sharp piece of bone, she carved in the bark pictures of the sun, moon, stars, plants, trees, and animals. And she went down to the lake shore and soaked the moccasins in water until they grew soft. Then she molded them to her feet, but they still were too big, and they flip-flap-flopped like ducks' feet as she walked. And then all the people came out of the wigwams. They pointed and stared. "Look at that ugly girl," they laughed. "Look at that strange clothes. Hey, 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 go home, you ugly girl. You'll never marry the invisible being." But the rough-faced girl had faith in herself, and she had courage. She didn't turn back. She just kept walking right through the village. All right, and I forgot to show you a picture of her asking her father for those things. So here's the rough-faced girl asking her father for a dress and moccasins. And then here is her with the things that she made to wear for herself. Okay, now remember also that what does she have on her face and her arms and her hair? Do you remember? Okay, so like her face and her arms are burnt and her hair is all broken off and burnt from the fire that her sisters made her watch and keep up for them. Okay, so everybody's walking around making fun of her and her new outfit that she's made for herself, but is she letting that bother her? No. So it says she had courage and she had faith in herself, and she just kept walking. As she walked on, she saw the great beauty of the earth and the skies spreading before her, and truly she alone of all in that village saw in these things the sweet yet handsome face of the invisible being. Okay, let's see if you can see all of this. And then on this page right here, do you see the face in the center of it? And there's the eyes and the mouth. You see that? At last she came to the lake shore just as the sun was sinking behind the hills, and the many stars came glittering out like a fiery veil in the darkening sky overhead. And there, standing by the water's edge, was the sister of the invisible being, waiting. Now, the sister of the invisible being was a wise woman, and when she looked at you, she didn't just see your face, or your clothes, or your hair. No, when she looked at you, she would look right into your eyes, and she could see all the way down to your heart. And she could tell if you had a good, kind heart, or a cold, hard, and cruel one. And when she looked at the rough-faced girl, she saw at once that though her skin was scarred, her hair burnt, her clothes strange, she had a beautiful, kind heart. And so she welcomed her dearly, saying, "Ah, my sister, why have you come?" And the rough-faced girl replied, "I have come to marry the invisible being." "Ah," said the sister very gently now, "if you want to marry him, you have to have seen him. Tell me, have you seen my brother, the invisible being?" And the rough-faced girl said, "Yes." "All right then," said the sister. "If you have seen him, tell me, what's his bow made of?" And the rough-faced girl said, "His bow? Why, it is the great curve of the rainbow." "Ah," the sister exclaimed in excitement. "Tell me," she asked, "if you have seen my brother, the invisible being, what's the runner of his sled made of?" And the rough-faced girl, looking up into the night sky, said, "The runner of his sled? Why, it is the spirit road, the Milky Way of stars that spread across the sky." All right, and if you can see it, it's right there, the runner. "Ah," cried the sister in wonder and delight, "you have seen him. Come with me." And taking the rough-faced girl by the hand, she led her back to the great wigwam and sat her in the seat next to the entrance, the wife's seat. Then they heard footsteps coming along the path, closer and closer. The entrance flap of the wigwam lifted up, and in stepped the invisible being. And when he saw her sitting there, he said, "At last, we have been found out." Then smiling kindly, he added, "And oh, my sister, but she is beautiful." And his sister said, "Yes." The sister of the invisible being then gave the rough-faced girl the finest of buckskin robes and a necklace of perfect shells. "Now bathe in the lake," she said, "and dress in these." So the rough-faced girl bathed in the waters of the lake. Suddenly all the scars vanished from her body. Her skin grew smooth again, and her beautiful black hair grew in long and glossy as a raven's wing. Now anyone could see that she was indeed beautiful. but the invisible being and his sister had seen that from the start. All right, so there's her washing away all of the scars. Then at last, the rough-faced girl and the invisible being were married, and they lived together in great gladness and were never parted. And there's a picture of that. All right, so there's a story of that. Does anybody have an idea what the lesson was? This is the part where I'm kind of sad that I can't hear you, because what I always like about this part when I ask you what the lesson was is I always have what I think the lesson is, but you guys always seem to have a different perspective of what it is that I haven't ever thought of, and that's the part where I always like to hear what you have to say. So if you can and you want to and your parents will let you, you can comment on what you think the lesson is in the comment section below, and if not, that's okay too. For me, what I think this is that good things happen to you when you are kind and not when you are not good. Like her sisters were really mean and cruel, and good things didn't happen for them. And she was really kind and sweet, and good things did end up happening for her. Remember, it doesn't have to just be one lesson, it can be several. So another one is also that just because something looks good on the outside does not mean that it's good on the inside, does it? So the sisters were beautiful, and they had the best clothes, the best everything, but were they good on the inside? No. And then the rough-faced girl had burnt scars on her face and on her arms, and her hair was all broken off. But was she beautiful on the inside? Yes. And so in the end, good happened for her because she was so good. And then she ended up having all that washed away and was beautiful like she really was on the inside also. Did anybody think of a fairy tale that this sounded like? Probably if you did, what gave it away might have been the two mean sisters and then the one girl that didn't have very much and was sweet and kind. And if you said Cinderella, then you are correct. Remember, her ugly stepsisters made her do everything, and then in the end, who ended up getting everything that was good, and that was Cinderella. All right. Also, these life lessons don't also just have to be about people. It can also be about things. Like, for example, well, this book is a good example of that. This book doesn't look good on the outside at all, but it has beautiful illustrations on the inside, and it has a beautiful story. So that's a good example. Or like a bike. Maybe you have a bike and it doesn't look very good, or you know someone that has a bike and it doesn't look very good, but it like rides awesome and it's like in really great shape. So it doesn't always have to be about people. It can also be about things, which also could be don't judge a book literally by its cover. So all right, well, anyway, I hope that you liked this book, because I really like this book. So remember, if you're going to take an AR test on it, everything that you need for that is written below. And like I told the 3rd grade video that I made also for their library week, I know things are kind of weird right now and different, and probably things are starting to get a little boring, but just remember to try to learn something new. This is all different for all of us, but your teachers really, and me, well, I am your teacher too, but we all really care about you, and that's why we're going through this, making these videos. If you had told us at the beginning of the year that we were all going to make YouTube videos, that would have been so funny, but here we are doing that because we care about you. So that's what we're all willing to go through, these weird things, just to care about you and show you that we care about you. So learn something new, watch your videos, do your math, do your reading, do your Achieve 3000, stay awesome, keep learning. There's just a few more weeks of school left. You can do this, and I will see you next week for library. Bye.